October 1st, 1993, a 12-year-old girl was enjoying a sleepover with her friends in her own bedroom. Within minutes, she would vanish without a trace, triggering one of the largest manhunts in American history. Her name was Polly Klaas. It was a normal Friday night in Petaluma, California. Polly and two friends were having a slumber party when a masked intruder entered the room carrying a knife. He tied up the two girls, kidnapped Polly, and disappeared into the darkness. The case exploded across the nation. Thousands of volunteers joined the search. Law enforcement agencies worked around the clock. Polly's father became the public face of the desperate effort to bring his daughter home. For weeks, hope remained alive that she would be found safely, but the investigation hit dead ends. Then, nearly 2 months later, authorities arrested a man named Richard Allen Davis after linking him to the crime through physical evidence and witness accounts. The truth that followed was heartbreaking. Davis confessed to abducting Polly and later killing her. In December 1993, investigators located her remains in a remote area of Northern California. She was only 12 years old. The murder shocked the United States and sparked major changes in child safety laws. It also helped inspire the expansion of systems used to track and monitor convicted sex offenders, influencing legislation that would later become known as Megan's Law. More than 3 decades later, the story of Polly Klaas remains one of America's most remembered child abduction cases, a reminder of how a single night changed countless lives forever. Imagine leaving a friend's house on a quiet Saturday evening and never making it home. Within hours, a routine night out would turn into one of the most horrifying criminal cases in Tennessee's history. This is the story of Channon Christian. On January 6, 2007, 21-year-old Channon Christian and her boyfriend, Christopher Newsom, were driving in Knoxville, Tennessee, after spending time with friends. Somewhere along their route, they were carjacked and abducted by a group of criminals. What happened next shocked investigators, the local community, and eventually the entire nation. According to court records, the couple was taken to a house where they were held against their will and subjected to prolonged abuse. Christopher Newsom was later murdered, and his body was discovered near nearby railroad tracks. Channon Christian suffered a similarly tragic fate. Her body was found the following day in a trash container miles away. As detectives pieced together the evidence, multiple suspects were identified and arrested. The investigation uncovered a series of disturbing details that were later presented during lengthy court proceedings. The trials that followed resulted in convictions for several individuals involved in the crimes. Some received life sentences without the possibility of parole, while others faced additional penalties based on their roles in the offenses. Nearly 2 decades later, the murders of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom remain among the most notorious criminal cases in Tennessee history. Their story is remembered not only for its brutality, but also for the determination of investigators, prosecutors, and the victims' families to pursue justice. What began as an ordinary evening became a tragedy that left a permanent mark on an entire community, and a case that many still remember today. Valentine's Day, 2013. In a luxury home in South Africa, gunshots shattered the early morning silence. Within hours, one of the country's most famous athletes would be at the center of a case that captured global attention. The woman who lost her life that day was Reeva Steenkamp. Reeva was a 29-year-old model, law graduate, and television personality. Friends described her as intelligent, ambitious, and passionate about helping others. She had built a successful modeling career while also advocating against violence toward women. In the early hours of February 14, 2013, Reeva was inside the home of her boyfriend, Olympic and Paralympic athlete Oscar Pistorius, in Pretoria, South Africa. Pistorius fired multiple shots through a locked bathroom door, striking Reeva and killing her. The case immediately became international news. Pistorius claimed he believed an intruder was inside the bathroom and did not realize it was Reeva behind the door. Prosecutors argued that the shooting was intentional. What followed was one of the most closely watched trials in modern South African history. Court proceedings stretched over several years, with appeals and legal challenges drawing intense public scrutiny. In 2015, South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal overturned an earlier culpable homicide conviction and found Pistorius guilty of murder. He was later sentenced to prison. While the legal battle dominated headlines, Riva's family consistently emphasized the importance of remembering the victim at the center of the story. More than a decade later, Riva Steenkamp is remembered not just for the tragedy that ended her life, but for her achievements, her advocacy, and the impact she had on those who knew her. Her story remains one of the most widely discussed criminal cases in South African history. On a cold November evening in 2010, a 13-year-old girl left her sports center in a small town in northern Italy and never returned home. What followed would become one of the most complex and widely followed criminal investigations in Italian history. Her name was Chiara Gambarasio. On November 26, 2010, Chiara left a gymnastics center in Brembate di Sopra, Italy, and began the short journey home. But somewhere along the way, she vanished without a trace. Her disappearance triggered an enormous search effort. Police officers, volunteers, and investigators worked tirelessly, searching fields, roads, and nearby communities. As days turned into weeks, hope slowly began to fade. 3 months later, in February 2011, a heartbreaking discovery was made. Chiara's body was found in an open field several miles from where she had disappeared. Investigators faced a difficult challenge. There were few clear leads, and the case seemed stalled. But forensic evidence recovered during the investigation would eventually become the key to solving the mystery. In one of the largest DNA investigations ever conducted in Europe, authorities collected and analyzed thousands of DNA samples from local residents. After years of work, investigators identified a suspect, Massimo Bossetti, a construction worker from the area. Bossetti denied involvement, but prosecutors argued that DNA evidence strongly connected him to the crime. Following a lengthy legal process, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. The case remains the subject of public debate and discussion in Italy. More than a decade later, Chiara Gambarasio's story continues to resonate across the country. She is remembered not for the tragedy that took her life, but for the lasting impact her case had on criminal investigations and forensic science. What began as an ordinary trip home became a mystery that gripped an entire nation, and a case that Italy has never forgotten.